Hello and welcome to the Rabyd Atheist. I'm Rabyd, a former pastor turned atheist, now a compassionate anti-theist. Welcome to my channel. Like and share this video. Join the Rabyd Nation, a nation of people dedicated to normalizing atheism and deconversion by hitting that subscribe button. And if you want to support the channel in a more tangible way, hit the join button and your membership options that lead to citizenship in the Rabyd Nation will be presented to you. So today I'm responding to a video whose creator Kyle Butt claims to have 6 proofs for God. This is the World Video Bible School series. I have seen this responded to many times and I figured it was my turn. The video is part of that World Video Bible School, and unfortunately the only comment allowed, it seems to be a link placed to where one can ask questions about the video but no longer interact with it. That said, let's see if Mr. Butt has anything new for me to ponder and when it comes to the existence of God. So here we go.
Socrates once stated that we should follow the argument wherever it leads. When we look at the most profound question of life, does God exist? We should certainly follow his advice. When we do, we'll find evidences that show us God is real. Let's look at 6 proofs that show God exists.
I am all for following Socrates' admonition to follow the argument wherever it leads, except I would state that I would follow the evidence where it leads, which is where I think Socrates is actually going. Now, according to Kyle, if we do this, then we will find evidence for God's existence everywhere and prove God. The thing is, I did the same thing and found the exact opposite. So let's see if he has something new that I didn't think of.
Number 1, the universe must have a cause. The most fundamental law of science is the law of cause and effect. And it says that for every material effect we see, there is a cause that came before it or was simultaneous to it, and that is greater than it.
The universe must have a cause. The law of causality is supposedly a thing, so let's grant it for the sake of argument. However, I'm not sure about the greater than it part that you add. I have seen videos of large avalanches caused by small pebbles, so it doesn't necessarily have to be greater than the effect. Okay, it just has to cause the effect. I am not sure that is something that I would agree with, this idea of greater than it, because I get where you're going with it. I get why as an apologist you want to add this, because then you can get to the greatest cause of all, God, right? But your defense seems fabricated or massaged to your advantage with that little last line in there. You also didn't tell me where you got this definition from, which you do through pretty much this entire video. There's lots of quotes, definitions and stuff in quotes, but no cited sources, except when it seems advantageous to the video and what you're trying to present. But we'll leave it at that.
The universe is a material effect. So what caused the universe? You see, if you don't believe in a creator, then you have to suggest something like a singularity. That's what is popular today, that there was some type of singularity that exploded in something called the Big Bang. But then when you try to get down to the bottom of what's a singularity, well, what we hear from the scientific community that suggests to us, the cosmologists, they say, well, a singularity was something that popped into existence from nothing. Do you know that if there ever were a time when there was nothing, that's exactly what we would have now? The idea that something popped into existence from nothing is simply not a scientific idea.
This has got to be one of the worst explanations of Big Bang cosmology I've heard in a while. First of all, it isn't an explosion, and it isn't just a suggestion, and it isn't just a popular notion, but one based on the observation of astronomical data. Big Bang cosmology is kind of unfortunately named, but it isn't a guess, no matter what apologists try to paint it as. Secondly, you never tell us who says that the singularity came from nothing. You kind of assert that that's what people say, but I've never heard anybody say that. There is no one that I have read or who is an expert in this field that I've listened to on Big Bang cosmology that says it came from nothing. This continues to be an apologist mischaracterization of Big Bang cosmology, and quite frankly, it's dishonest. And now that it's been told all you apologists have been told this over and over and over and over again, it's now dishonest to continue to present it this way. You're presenting a falsehood that most of us don't believe. None of us believe that the universe came from nothing, okay? You know what I would really like if apologists would actually portray the viewpoints of their opponents and deal with those accurate portrayals instead of fabricating these nice little straw men to fight. Here, let me have a match.
You see, they're suggesting that that singularity is somehow natural, but it behaves supernaturally. They say that that singularity wouldn't have followed the laws of nature. Well, then, so what are we left with? We're left with the fact that the universe had a beginning, and it was not a natural cause. It was something above nature. It was something super nature, something supernatural. And so when we see the material effect of the universe, we can know that there was a supernatural creator that caused the universe.
Oh, the rest of this is just really bad. Just because science talk about how the laws of physics might be very different as we get closer to the singularity doesn't mean that they suddenly become supernatural. This is a nice little word play and playing around with definitions, but you just injected that idea without any real justification. Just because we don't have a good understanding of what the laws would be or the understandings of how nature works at that point doesn't suddenly make them beyond nature. Okay, it still would be a naturalistic explanation if we ever find it. Maybe we haven't found that explanation yet, but it doesn't mean that we're going to just throw in a supernatural idea, which is a completely different issue. You don't get just to throw this supernatural cause into it just because people say, I don't know. You have to justify why it belongs there. You don't get to throw the idea of the creator in either, which you just leap to and don't justify. This is good classic God of the gaps. You're trying to win the argument by the elimination of other options, but you really haven't done that, as you have only eliminated, and I put eliminated in air quotes, one of them, and you haven't done a good job of that either. Sorry, I'm only convinced at this point you really don't understand what Big Bang cosmology is saying, because I've actually read stuff about it and how it's presented by actually people that hold to it. And you're misrepresenting it on purpose, okay? This is now well known what Big Bang cosmology really is. And for you guys to not actually engage somebody who actually holds to Big Bang cosmology and use their description of how it works, instead come up with your own, is just patently dishonest.
Proof number 2. Design demands a designer. It is a truism that everybody recognizes that this universe looks designed. In fact, when we see the various different aspects of nature, and we see birds and squirrels and trees, and we see all of the things that they do so well, many times we as humans, we try to copy and mimic that design, but often we don't do nearly as well as the design that we see in nature. We look at the design of the human body and the human hand and the arm and the leg and the brain, and we see that those are some of the most advanced, technologically savvy pieces of equipment ever put together, and we try to mimic them and copy them, and we can't do it as well. Why? Because this universe exhibits design from the starry sky at night to the fingertips on your hand. The design is overwhelming. It's everywhere. Where does design originate? Well, what you and I both know is that when you see things that function and they're complex, that design comes from an intelligent designer. Big explosions just simply don't bring about order. They don't cause things that are functional and complex to come into existence. The design we see in the universe demands a supernatural, intelligent designer.
Design demands a designer. I don't think it is a truism that this universe looks designed to everybody, but rather a lot of people perceive it as design, and there can be a lot of reasons for that. That doesn't imply that it's design. Most notably, seeing patterns and repetitions and things like that is a good survival trait. It allows you to predict things. You have literally given me just look at the trees argument at this point, and I actually find that kind of funny. But to say that the human body is the best designed piece of equipment is laughable. One of the arguments against the design argument is how things are so poorly designed, particularly the human body. I mean, just look at female reproduction system and tell me that that's a good design. Just because something appears to be designed doesn't prove that it is. There has to be evidence of a design, not just feeling that something is designed. You're appealing to intuition here, and you're going to do that a lot in this video. And you're not really appealing to facts, and just trust me, I've made a note of it. You inject the idea of supernatural again without justifying it. Just because the natural explanation isn't necessarily what we expect doesn't mean that it suddenly becomes supernatural or outside nature. That's a leap that you're making that you really haven't connected the dots with. The fact that you don't state an argument from design as well as others also is pretty telling, because I've heard better, presentations of the design argument. Yours is actually kind of weak. There are plenty of alternatives to a designer, but so far you've not really dealt with any of them. You just asserted that none of them work, and the only thing that works is a designer. Once again, you're making a claim, but you still haven't provided evidence for your claim.
Proof number 3. Life demands a supernatural life giver. You see, in the material world, we have come to understand that there is a law of biology called the law of biogenesis. Law of biogenesis simply says this, that in this material, natural world, life comes from previously existing life of its own kind. Now, when we look at how people used to think about life, they said, no, life can arise spontaneously from non-living chemicals. And yet every single biological experiment has shown us that that simply is biologically impossible. Life doesn't arise from non-living chemicals. From where did life arise? Where did life originate if it doesn't arise from non-living chemicals? You see, the idea that there's no God suggests to us that there had to be some singularity without a cause that exploded, and that explosion brought about design, which we've never ever seen happen, and then ultimately somewhere the non-living chemicals gave rise to life. But that's biologically impossible. Life demands a supernatural creator.
Life demands a supernatural life giver. So we're not even going to try to sneak the idea of supernatural into this one this time. We're just going to assert it without any evidence or as a proof of God without any evidence. Number one, your definition of the law of biogenesis sounds suspicious to me. It smacks of creationism. It sounds like a definition a creationist would give to it because of the line of its own kind, which is kind of ironic because every time you try to pin a creationist down on what they mean by kind, they get really evasive. I read a lot of scientific definitions over the years, and that phrasing is something I usually only see with creationists. That said, I'm also not sure that it is completely accurate. Every single experiment has not shown that it is biologically impossible to get life from non-life. I know this will get some comments, but they haven't done it in a lab from creationists who want to comment in my comment section to defend what Kyle is saying, but abiogenesis is a field of science, and it has a lot of validity. We have created amino acids from base chemicals in the lab. Have we created life? No, but we have created the building blocks of life, which are amino acids. If that can be done, it doesn't take too much understanding of how chemistry works to see how, well, this could evolve into something else that actually is living. It's not too much of a leap from amino acids to RNA and RNA to DNA. There's a good string of possibilities along the way that could see non-living chemicals become living ones. Just because we're still working on how we would demonstrate that in nature, it isn't far-fetched science fiction anymore. It's a real possibility with several steps along the way having been proven in the lab. And if you want more information, I'd go look up the people that know it, but I've at least read them and realized, hey, there's a lot more to this than they didn't prove that in the lab. You need to really, work on that a little bit. Now, your whole string of reasoning is built on so many falsehoods. We don't know what the cause of the singularity is. 2, you assume design. And 3, it's biologically impossible for life to originate non-life. You do realize that people can look this stuff up, right? I mean, to be honest, you've made all these claims. We don't know the cause of singularity. That may be true, but it doesn't mean it's God. Just because you assume design doesn't mean a designer. I would look at things and say, I don't really think they're designed. That looks more like the product of evolution to me. And It's not biologically impossible for life to originate from non-life, at least from the standpoint of what we know about chemistry. So everything you said at the end of this part is literally a claim with no evidence presented, where there's evidence that exists contrary to what you just claimed. People can look this up. You do know that, right?
Proof number 4. Moral law demands a moral lawgiver. If some things are objectively morally right and other things are objectively morally wrong, then there must be a God. You see, if we evolved from primordial slime over multiplied millions of years, at what point did objective moral values arise? We don't look at a dog and say that that dog objectively, morally violated some rule when he steals a bone from another dog. We don't say, hey, he violated a objective moral value. We just don't say that. But we do say that humans can perpetrate things that are objectively morally wrong, that humans can be involved in things that are morally right. If that's true, there must be a God.
Moral law demands a moral lawgiver. First of all, you assume objective morality is a thing, which I don't see that it is. You didn't prove that it exists. Your entire moral argument here is predicated on assuming that the tenets of the moral argument are right. If you did prove that objective morality was a thing, then you would prove God actually isn't necessary for it, because morality that would be objective, so it would exist outside of a subject like God. The moment you connect morality to God, it becomes subjective to God's authority. Okay? It's a continued apologist's lack of understanding of what the words objective and subjective mean when it comes to the context of moral discussions. To connect morality to God makes it subjective to God. An objective morality would not have any connection to God, because then that would make it subjective. So your initial reasoning doesn't follow, and the rest is assuming objective morality is a thing which you didn't prove and just assert. So, sorry, not very convincing.
Proof number 5, free will exists. The atheistic idea that there is no God is founded on the idea of materialism. The idea that this material world is all that there is, all that there was, and all that there ever will be. Because of that, atheism has to suggest that you as a person don't really have free will, that there is no being inside of your body or brain that is super matter, that really what's going on in your brain is just electrons bouncing around, and you're the product of those bounces, and you don't really make decisions on your own. It's just the physical laws and properties going on in your brain. If you are watching this video of your own volition, then the fact of the matter is there has to be a God that can account for that free will that you as a person have. There has to be a God if there is free will.
Free will exists, so assertions are now proofs in and of themselves. Atheism is not founded on materialism. That's a straight-up falsehood I hear from a lot of apologists. Many atheists are also materialists, but not necessarily so. Materialism does suggest that there is no free will. The thing is, what your argument is trying to say is, does that feel right to you? I'm probably going to say this again in other videos in the future on the subject of materialism, but just because something doesn't intuitively feel right doesn't mean that it isn't true. Kyle doesn't disprove materialism as untrue, but rather tries to make it feel intuitively icky. Just because an idea doesn't feel right or sit right with you intuitively doesn't make it untrue in reality. And Kyle is just trying to appeal to intuition, which isn't a proof, it's just an appeal.
And proof number 6, human reasoning. You see, we reason on a regular basis. We understand abstract ideas. If we were products of blind, chance, random processes over multiplied millions of years, reasoning and the laws of reasoning simply would have no explanation. And yet we reason together on a regular basis. From where does reason arise? It's got no naturalistic, atheistic explanation.
Human reason. All right, you just talked about materialism being determinism and a part of atheism in this worldview that you've concocted in your head. If that is your understanding, why would you come to the conclusion that the same atheists and materialists would believe that Big Bang cosmology, evolution, and abiogenesis would be random and based on chance. Materialism doesn't have any randomness or chance to it. This is talking out of both sides of your mouth. There would be no consistency in holding a deterministic, materialistic view of the world and then thinking that things are random and a product of chance. This idea of injecting randomness and a product of chance is another intuitive appeal. It isn't giving evidence. Nothing said in science regarding any of these things implies chance, but following certain natural descriptive laws depending on the area of science. And to state that there is no naturalistic explanation for reasoning is just inviting criticism. You do know that this thing called the internet exists. Apologists like to say stuff like this all the time, that there's no natural reason given by atheists for X. And then you know what I find? There's usually 100 YouTube videos offering an explanation for X by atheists based on whatever, evolution, survival. There's an explanation for human reasoning based on evolution. It's an evolutionary trait that developed because it has superior survival and thriving qualities. It's natural that it would develop. And there's many explanations of why reason developed. What you really need to say is that what you really should say is that atheists and materialists and others do offer an explanation, but because that actually would be true and not the falsehood you just said, I just don't accept them, and here is why. That would be a better way to put this. If you were up there, what you'd say, well, we have these many materialistic and naturalistic explanations for things, but we don't accept any of them, and here's why. That would be honest. But this dishonest tactic of mischaracterization of what atheism is, and the continual lie, they don't have any explanation for anything, whatever it may be, is just tiring. It might convince people who are already convinced, who don't want to bother to look up anything up. But people who know the explanations and do follow up with research are going to know that what you just said is crap. Okay? That there are actually explanations for human reasoning that don't have anything to do with a God. You just don't accept them. Well, they're going to look at this video and they're going to see the deception, because that's what it is. It's deception. They're going to look stuff up, find out that, oh, wait a minute. There is explanations of why human reasoning exists based on an evolutionary model. Why would Kyle Butt say that there weren't any when here I'm looking at 5 or 6 of them? I don't get this. You apologists seem to apparently don't really think much of the intelligence or the curiosity of your own audience. Throughout this video, your proofs are actually assertions that you claim is true, and then you don't actually prove them eventually. And this is particularly evident in the last few of them. But all of them have been claims, not evidence. The fact that this entire video is based on your faulty foundation of this, assuming that somehow you can assert things and that constitutes a proof, well, that's pretty telling of the current state of apologetics. But it also shows that you don't really know what the difference is between a proof of something and a claim of something. And that's something that's really kind of sad.
Antony Flew, the atheist who wrote Theology and Falsification, the most popular atheistic paper for the last 100 years, the last century. In 2006, he co-wrote a book titled There Is a God, How the World's Most Notorious Atheist Became a Believer. He stated that his rule of life had always been to follow the evidence where it leads. And he said he followed that evidence. And it led him to the conclusion that there is a supernatural, intelligent God. Let's let the evidence lead us to that same conclusion.
Antony Flew. I don't care. I think he was wrong. Okay. Here's the thing. I don't think Mr. Flew became a Christian. Okay. What I think he is he became a deist. Okay. He began to think that God still could be offered up as certain explanations for certain things he couldn't understand or explain. But that doesn't mean that what he said was true, and that giving up his atheism was a good or true idea. Atheists do not believe in God because they don't find the evidence convincing for a God. Just because an atheist might change their mind on what they think is evidence doesn't mean that they were right. I really don't care what Antony Flew said or thought, okay, because I'm in my own state of atheism, in my own place of where I'm at, and that doesn't prove anything. This is the real problem with this video. If I really get down to it with the overall critique of it, It's one appeal to intuition after another. There's no real evidence given from it. Despite the claim of Mr. Butt at the beginning that he was going to see, that through this Socratic method, we could see all these evidence for the existence of God, instead he makes 6 assertions that don't necessarily prove God in the first place or don't have any evidence to back them. He constantly makes the claim that atheists, materialists, and other people don't have explanations for these things, and we do. I'm going to call it what it is as somebody who studied political science. This is a propaganda piece. This really isn't something that I would put out to an atheist to try to convince them. It's more of what you put to the flock in order to keep them in the faith. And that's probably the biggest thing about this video I wanted to point out today. This is a really good example of how you create something for a video Bible school so that people that are already predisposed to believe will have some sort of convincing argument that justifies their continued belief. But any decent atheist, materialist, or anybody who looked at this so-called proofs for God would go, you don't even know what you're talking about, and you certainly aren't representing everything accurately. In fact, I would say some of your representations are downright deceptive. Well, that's it for me. I'd be curious to see what everybody else thinks about Mr. Butt and his video, but I was completely unimpressed. And I did watch a lot of reactions and responses to this video over the last couple of years. And the problem is that I felt that people should be a little bit stronger on calling out Mr. Butt on, quite frankly, not knowing what the hell he's talking about. Okay, I get that we're trying to always be gentler and a kinder atheist nation, but to be honest, I just didn't find anything that he did very convincing. And quite frankly, it was really, really bad. And honestly, I think he's just trying to keep the flock faithful. It doesn't have anything to do with convincing anybody of the proofs of God. Well, thanks for stopping by. I appreciate every like, share, subscribe. Let me give a shout out to my members, my Rabyd citizens, my citizens. Thank you very much for supporting me. You're the thing that makes some of my videos work, and I appreciate that. And as always, thanks for stopping by, and live your best life. You only get one go around, so make sure it's a good one. Give all your time, your money, your opportunities to building up yourself, your relationships with the people you love and care for, and to making this a better world. And don't waste them on the trappings of religion and faith, because that's a dead end. And as always, thanks for stopping by, and I'll catch you next time.